Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. As you may notice, as you get awarded a doctorate, they give you a pair of glasses to try and at least look intelligent. So I'll start on that basis. And then there we go, fellow glass wearers. Let's shake those glasses. Thank you for that, Cyril. Very welcome. Let me just share with you some of the slides and we'll get into our dialogue together. Really looking forward to this conversation. So just a bit of brief background on myself. I'm recognizing some familiar faces and lots of new faces. So my name is Colm Murphy. I am based in Dublin in Ireland. A bit of background. I've been running my own coaching business for 14 years. I'm now currently a partner in Priceta Ireland, which is part of the global Priceta executive coaching organization. I've just completed my doctorate in team coaching. I've also been a co-editor of the team coaching casebook along with David Clutterbuck and Tammy Turner. And I'm also currently the program director for GTCI Senior Practitioner. And I know that we have some of our faculty on this call and our alumni and some of our participants. So you're all very welcome to this conversation. And that feels really pertinent. I'm going to promise you, I'm not going to take 90 minutes of your life to regurgitate my doctorate viva with you. You'd be glad to hear. But I will be using it as a springboard to get us having some conversations. And there's a key part of this session, it's the dialogue. And so I want to be clear in my expectations. And I'm sure for many of us as coaches or as people in HR or OD, we'll share these. But really, the invitation is co-inquiry. I and nobody else in the world has all the answers, especially around team coaching. We are forming this together and it's co-researchers. So I welcome the co-inquiry today and all of the perspectives. Some of us are very experienced as team coaches. Some of us have published. Some of us are going through the journey of developing our practice. Some are new. Some may never have seen team coaching before. It's all welcomed. And so whatever you bring today from whatever direction is very welcome. So co-inquiry, also the invitation is co-creation so that we are more than the sum of our parts. So looking forward to seeing what we together create out of these 90 minutes. The encouragement is peer learning. So as we share in our breakout rooms, our sharing and our listening and our sense making will increase our learning for each other and ourselves. And I would also like to hold the responsibility for 126 people that I'm not responsible for your learning this afternoon or this evening or this morning. I'm asking you to go and find that nugget. And if you're in a breakout room and the question I've posed isn't energizing you as a group, find another angle. So please make the most of these conversations, and whichever way you come into this, find a learning that you can take back to your practice or to your organization. So there's my ask of you all. So what do we have planned for the next 90 minutes? And I realized building this slide, I've been watching far too much cricket this summer. And I also realized cricket is not a sport that necessarily travels across the globe all the time. But basically the plan is I'd like to share some opening insights into the motivation for my research and today's title, give you a bit of background on some terminology. Then we'll be getting you into breakout groups to have discussions and to share back. Then in the middle, we'll be sharing a bit more about the actual team coaching that was part of my research and the relational findings. Then we'll be inviting you into a breakout room again to have a discussion on what you're making of that and how your practice is based on relationships. And then as we come to the end, I'll be sharing a final insight around team coaching for my doctorate, one more breakout group. And then the invitation as we wrap up is to stay after the 90 minutes and have a real or virtual cocktail or a cup of coffee or a glass of water and hang out and have some conversations. And Nicola will tell us a bit more about that when we get to the end of the session. So let's start off with the openers. So it felt important for me maybe to share with you as a setup for our first breakout room some of the motivations for me doing the research, which started 7 years ago. And so on a practice side, 7, 8, 9 years ago, as I began to develop my team coaching practice, I began to and still continue to hear the question, but does it work? You're asking us to invest all this money. You're asking us to invest the time of not just me as the leader, but of my team. Does team coaching work? And then I also wondered, well, what do I or my clients mean by work? So that was a motivation. I wasn't sure 7 years ago I could really answer that question. It was a sense of, yes, something will come out of this, but does it work? And also, well, how does it work and where? What type of teams is team coaching going to be most applicable to? A lot of the research and the cases are focused on leadership teams. What about an operational team? What about a project team? What about a middle management team? Does team coaching have different impacts in different types of teams? And there are only 3 types I've mentioned. What about virtual? What about hybrid? So where does it work and how does it work? And part of the motivation was also what excites me about team coaching is the emergence of it. It felt when I first began to explore one-to-one coaching, the great works had been written and the great ideas have been developed. Whereas with team coaching, I still feel like we're on the nursery slopes. We're still together exploring what it looks like. And if you do meet somebody who tells you there's one way of doing team coaching, I would be very keen you avoid that person, because all I can learn is there's so many different types of teams and so many different ways to work with them. So that was part of the motivation, which was develop some scholarship into my practice. And at the same time, though, the profession was developing. So whether it's the Riddler report in the UK or Coach Source globally, but this sense that team coaching was growing in demand and supply. And interesting enough for me, the demand part is really only kicking in these last 6 to 9 months. Something has happened in Ireland anyway, where team coaching is definitely more front of mind, but it is growing. And we know that the supply of team coaches has usually grown. So I wanted to bring scholarship, but this thing was getting bigger. I'm also beginning to noticing that EMCC, ICF, AC, we're starting to actually give team coaching its own standards or competencies, accreditation of coaches and providers. So the profession of team coaching is growing at the same time. And then a third motivation was when I went into the literature, was to recognize that we're still very early on in terms of scholarship on team coaching. Practice far outstrips scholarship at the moment. And so some of these quotes would just highlight that, the need for more research to explain and evaluate its contribution, sparse literature and scholarship. Even with the increase over the last few years, it's been a lot about the coach's perspective. What are the key competencies of a coach? What are coaches making of team coaching? And for me, there was an interest in what did the team members make of this, but also what did the team stakeholders make of this? And at the same time, a recognition that teams, as the quote says, are the basic building blocks of modern organizations. Many of us are members of multiple teams. And I think COVID has reinforced, and post-COVID reinforced, the challenge of leading and being part of teams in this new environment. There are some of the motivations. And I'm going to come back to the question of, does it work or not? So that all led to a doctoral question, of which today is kind of a subset. And the research question I chose was, how does team coaching contribute to team effectiveness? On one side, you have team coaching, sparse literature in terms of academic research. On the other side, you have team effectiveness, over 100 years worth, all the way back to Hawthorne studies, lots of quantitative research on team effectiveness. And I began to think about, would team effectiveness be a way of providing some rigor or insight into the practice of team coaching? It's not the only way to measure it. And often in one-to-one, we don't feel the need to have that contribution measured. But when it comes to teams and the investment and the outcomes, it felt like team effectiveness may shine a light onto the practice of team coaching. And finally, just to talk about the research, it was qualitative research. It was action research, which meant that the participants, i.e. the team members, were very much researchers with myself and my fellow team coach. It was, we did the research through operationalizing team coaching. So they all went through a team coaching process. And it was their insights and their voices that have led to the findings in my research, and the voices and the findings of their stakeholders. So there's very little of what I was observing. It's more about what did they make of this? What did they notice worked or didn't work? And to me, that's a contribution we haven't always been able to experience. The other thing about action research and qualitative research is I am not claiming that we can generalize my findings to every single team in the world. So there's the caveat. There's always more research. Every research is limited by what you didn't do. They were not virtual. They all came from the same culture. Many different ways you could expand this study. But I'm hoping that there's some transferability to the teams you're working with and to your practice. So I'm not trying to generalize the findings. Okay, 2 more slides, and then I'll get you doing some work with the help of Nicola. I just want to unpack some definitions. So let's not make any assumptions. And again, many definitions of team coaching, but the definition I was using for my research comes from EMCC Global. And actually, I had the honor and the privilege of helping to co-write this with David Clutterbuck and a few others as we looked at the standards on team coaching. But the idea that the focus on team coaching is helping the team collectively achieve the team's work. Again, bringing in some of that team effectiveness language. The team's work being task work, what do we need to do? And teamwork, how do we do it? So common sense, but we don't always use that language in team coaching. So how do they get stuff done and how are they doing it? Doing that through a series of sustained conversations that raise both individual and collective reflection, self-awareness, that challenge the team's thinking and behavior with the goal that they develop their own sustainable solutions and practices. There is a time for us to leave the building like Elvis. And how do we leave the team resource to continue on their development without us having to be there? So for me, that was a key definition to work through. And one final definition. I've talked a lot about team effectiveness. What is that? So it's a measure of team performance. And I use the Hackman and Wagaman definition, which looks at team effectiveness from 3 dimensions. And again, in reading the literature, team effectiveness doesn't get mentioned a lot in our team coaching literature. And I personally think that's a gap. In team effectiveness literature, the outcomes are threefold. It's the outputs that the team produces that meets or exceeds the expectation of the stakeholders, which is a powerful conversation to have with any team. Who are your stakeholders and what are the outputs and the expectations? The second thing, though, is we could achieve the outputs, but not achieve the second dimension. Is this team viable to continue? I've seen teams, as you have, who maybe got the job done, but never wanted to be in a room with each other ever again. So is this team viable to keep going? Like great sports teams, it's not the one cup, it's the second and third. And finally, Hackman and Wagman measure team effectiveness through the contribution it makes to the learning and the well-being of team members, also described as team satisfaction. So what I was trying to do was get a sense of, as we went through the team coaching journey with these 3 teams, how were those 3 measures perceived by the team and their stakeholders at the start of the research and at the end? And what did team coaching move them? And if so, how and why? So let me pause there and set you a question that I would like you to explore for me. I talked earlier on about my motivation, and I see actually John's doing a great job of photographing this slide. Thank you, John, for reminding me there. So if you want to photograph this, it'll be good so you can remember when you're in breakout rooms. One of my motivations was to answer the question, does team coaching work? That's quite a blunt way of asking. So what I'd like you to share, you have 15 minutes. I'd like you to appoint a spokesperson, and I'll either ask them to share live with us if they feel comfortable or share via the chat. Would like you to make sure that all the voices are heard of the 4 other people. And let's be language aware. We're a very international group today. English isn't everybody's first language, but also language can be technical. So some of us may speak Clutterbuck language or Hawkins or Orsk or whatever that is. Let's make sure our language is accessible as we have these discussions. My question is, how do you describe the benefits of team coaching to prospective clients? What do you highlight for them as the benefits of engaging on this journey? Thanks, Nicola. Welcome back. We'd love to hear what conversations you had, and if you're in the NBO room and weren't engaged in the breakout, we'd love to hear your voices as well. So two options. If you'd like to share something through chat, that would give us all a chance to look at your thoughts. The question we were holding was, how do you describe the benefits of team coaching to prospective clients? And if you would like to maybe vocalize those benefits, if you go to the bottom of your screen, there is the reaction symbol, a smiley face. You click that, and there's a raise hand option. So we'd love to hear some voices.
Thanks, Colm. So I was volunteered from my group. We had a lovely discussion and very varied experiences of team coaching. So Benita was one of the members of the group who I think put it really well. She said that she would describe it as overcoming silos and becoming one team and collaborating. Okay. And then we had a kind of a discussion with another member of the group, which I think was Lynn, who was asking how to work well together when there are different aims within the team. And that was quite an interesting question. And David picked this up when he mentioned that he felt there was a real difference between team coaching and group coaching, and that sort of clarified things for me, certainly. So he was saying about team coaching very much having aims in common, whereas group coaching is more sort of trying to work with individuals who've got individual aims.
Yeah.
And then Uta and myself were talking from an educational perspective as well about some sort of misconceptions around coaching and mentoring, and the need to be sort of clearer about the differences between those things. Okay. So that was our discussion in a nutshell.
For 15 minutes, you had a lovely broad conversation there. So I'm hearing some of the benefits could be around team cohesion, how to break silos, but something around this idea of common purpose. So that, there's a lovely question that Peter Hawkins always asks, which is, what do we need to do together that we can't do apart? So we have our individual goals and purposes, but what's the collective? Thanks so much, Maureen, for that. And again, thank you for those sharing on chat. So I'm seeing Louisa talking about a collective understanding and practice to help the team achieve shared goals. And again, this idea of task work and teamwork, and these all speak to measures of effectiveness. Rachel, you were next up with your hand. So could I ask you to build on anything that was shared that you want to build on, or anything else you want to bring in from your group?
Yeah, sure. I was listening to the group from the perspective of I'm not a team coach yet. It's something I want to push my comfort zone, hence why I'm here. But I am a systemic solo coach. But we listed a lot of benefits. There's an awful lot of benefits that came through. So it's less about how we describe the benefits to what they were is where we kind of ended up with. But we were describing where we'd all come from. And as that was being described, I was picking up on these different things that didn't surprise me, but did make me go, oh, hang on, yeah, that would be a really valuable thing to talk about with a prospective client. It would be a really valuable way to describe team coaching. One was around the power of the team, that reality of how powerful it is for a team. They can make or break an organization or an initiative or a project. And that, that realization, that reality check for an organization to get their heads around that. There was another one actually, and Shelley came up with that because she was talking about dental teams, funnily enough, who, can really, a small business practice can go pop if the team's not right. Then I think Pooja was talking about the butterfly effect. So when we coach an individual, we know there's a butterfly effect to others within their organization. The things they work on will go and impact others, hopefully positively. But when you do a team event, that potential for impact is so much bigger, so much broader. There are so many more variables and touch points that those people take away from that session or series of sessions. And then Vivek talked about that method to scale coaching. So if an organization can't afford for one-on-one coaching for anyone beyond their board, but they want everyone to experience good coaching, it's a very affordable way to scale coaching, is to bring it into that team space, but while also unifying groups into teams and towards those common purposes, and for all those other benefits that have been listed so far. And then lastly, there was that, we think there's been a touch on, team training, team facilitation, group training, and that ability through coaching to use coaching as a method to deliver facilitation, to deliver team mentoring and training. And I think that's why it's such a woolly subject in some ways, because a definition of coaching can also be applied to many of those activities. So there is, again, that opportunity to blend those outcomes through almost a blended approach, including coaching.
Yes.
So that's one thing I thought, well, I wasn't expecting that.
Thanks, Rachel. So again, cohesion, bringing coaching to a larger audience maybe as well. But I love that idea as well, that teams can make or break an organization, especially senior leadership teams. So almost like, what is an organization willing to let fail by not supporting the development of a team? We're getting into, and again, that idea for me anyway, which is I see team coaching as an umbrella terminology. I facilitate sometimes, but that's all I'm doing. That's not team coaching. And sometimes it might involve one-to-one coaching, but that's all I'm doing. That's not team coaching. And there's a time to challenge, to use myself. There's OD work, but I think it's bringing in all our toolkits in service of the team and their purpose. Let's go for one more. So Avi, have I said your name right? Or Ave?
It's a little simpler. It's Ava. Thank you.
Even simpler. I made it complicated. Thank you.
Ave Maria.
Boy, Ave Maria, indeed. Thank you for that. What would you like to add on in terms of the benefits you were discussing in your room?
Some of the things we discussed was that the team leader or the team is expecting a behavior change or a culture change that will enable them to work better together. Yeah. And that would involve better relationships. They get to know each other's preferences, how they like to be working together, and sort of building on what was mentioned, taking out of silos, but also once they learn to work together better, they will be more effective, which is why I'm here to hear if that's also some scientific evidence to that. But usually teams do expect to start working more effectively together, so that because of team coaching, because they would be able to make decisions better together and also much faster.
Okay, so let's just pause there. So from our three speakers so far, we're hearing something about team coaching has the possibility of the benefit of cohesion. So us getting clarity on what jersey are we all wearing and why, that we're not all silos. I'm hearing something around culture, you just mentioned as well, that what's the culture of the team, and especially the senior leadership team, which a lot of my work is in, is they set the culture for the rest of the organization as well. If they behave in silos, guess what happens below them? So are they collaborating? I'm also hearing something about them being more effective, whatever that means to them. I guess I've heard others say the idea about teams needing to perform, otherwise the organization may fail. I see in the chat talk about trust being built. Ave mentioned also the idea of better decision making. We often see from research innovation happens at a team coaching. So many possible benefits. And I guess what I'd like to do is show you some of the outcomes from the research I've done, just to see if they add or map back to that. I know we've got lots of hands. I'm not going to get to everybody, but I'm hopefully going to get back to you all in our next breakout. So thank you for bearing with me. So there are benefits out there, but it can be hard sometimes to actually just say with certainty, this is the outcome. And maybe that's okay. I did a webinar recently with Peter Hawkins, and we were talking about how to partner and engage clients to go on the team coaching journey. And the analogy we were using was, let's not try and sell it as a package holiday. We can't guarantee it's 2 weeks somewhere sunny and you get a pool. That's quite limited, okay? What we could do is invite them on an expedition. And saying that, we were also sharing the idea that we may not know where this expedition goes, because every team starts somewhere different, but we've been on expeditions before. so we know how to help you go on the expedition. Is that making sense? So I can't always guarantee the outcomes of any coaching work, but what I can do is reassure the client that I understand enough of the complexities of teams that this expedition won't be a surprise to me wherever we end up. So I want to go back and just share now, in terms of my doctorate work, some of the findings around relationships, which is the core of this webinar today. So just a little bit of background for you. What team coaching was involved in the research projects. So it lasted a year, and the year was starting with the team and ending 12 months later with stakeholder workshops to ask them, had they noticed a difference? There was 2 team coaches throughout, 3 teams, which I'll talk about in a second. Each team had 9 team coaching sessions, spanning over 6 months, approximately 22 hours, so not a huge amount of time. The timing and the process was consistent. The content and the focus was obviously tailored for each team. And what we did, in a way of trying to take a photograph, was at the very start of team coaching, like many of us do, there was a diagnostic phase where we combined interviews with team members and stakeholders, along with using the team diagnostic survey created by Hackman and Wageman. And then at the end of the coaching, we re-interviewed the team members. They redid the team diagnostic survey, which speaks to those team effectiveness criteria. And we had a focus group with the stakeholders 6 months again after that. So a bit of triangulation. What were the team members saying to us? How were they scoring the team? And what were the stakeholders saying about the team as well? And so what I want to share with you as a lead in to our next piece is some of those findings. So again, 3 teams. Purposely didn't pick a leadership team because there's already been a lot of research around leadership teams. Carr and Peters and others have done some of that work. So wanted to look at, does the team type matter? And these were the 3 teams. Just a real brief snapshot. In meeting the management team, they themselves described the culture as toxic, backbiting, stabbed in the back. I hate our weekly meetings because I get attacked. The beauty of research is when you hear this information, as opposed to running out the door, you go, that's interesting. There's what they wanted from the team coaching was better relationships, cohesion, trust, all the things we just mentioned. Their stakeholders went, actually, not really interested in relationships. They just need to do the job better. Task, 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 task. Service line agreements, get it done. That's their world. The second team, an operations team doing a very manual process, they also described their culture as toxic, as unsafe. It wasn't safe to ask for help, and it wasn't safe to offer help. So signs of low psychological safety. Their stakeholders were all about do it right, get it right the first time, SLAs, just task, task, task. The third team, a strategic projects team, saw themselves as being wonderful. They had their crisis later on. We're a great team. We do wonderful stuff. Their stakeholders were all about relationships, saying, we're the senior leadership team. We give you strategic projects and you talk at us. You don't go and help us change together. You do change to us. This relationship isn't working. So that's where they began in terms of the initial framing of the diagnostic. And we'll come back to that relationship tasks piece in a second. So 2 of the insights I got in terms of relationships. The first was, look at those first 2 teams, the management and the operational team. They're describing themselves as toxic, low psychological safety, probably not their words, but my words, not trusting each other, hating team meetings, not being able to ask for help. They're also getting a lot of negative feedback from their stakeholders. And yet, by the end of the debrief of that data, in a very long, tough day, when we looked at their evaluations of where they were after the day, there was a real sense of hope in the room. Maybe this will be different. And I was trying to figure out, how do you go from it's toxic and I don't trust anybody on this call to, well, maybe we could do better. What was the thing that shifted to give them a sense of possibility? We've only done 1 session with them. We've interviewed them. And so when I looked at the data, this idea of, in one-to-one coaching, we often talk about the working alliance. It comes from therapy. Eric Dehan and others will talk about the relationship between the coach and the coachee being a key factor in the perceived success of coaching. And yet I hadn't seen anything ever written about team coaching working alliance. And so I was trying to conceptualize that shift as, in terms of working alliance, it's about a mutual goal, agreed and mutual tasks, and a bond. And something happened in that first workshop where there was just enough working alliance between us, the coaches, and the team, that they saw some hope, but also between the team members. So I'm conceptualizing working alliance in team coaching as coach and team members, but between the members themselves. And it felt like if we hadn't started to build that alliance, we wouldn't be able to move on, because the alliance began to shift to psychological safety. We'll see, actually, it didn't do enough for two teams, but for one team, it really shifted it. They began to see possibilities and move towards action. So that was one of the relationship insights we had, is relationships really matter, especially at the beginning of team coaching, not just between us and the team, but between the team members themselves. The second relational insight came from the very end of the research. When we went back to those stakeholders, especially the management and operational stakeholders, the ones who went task, 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 and we said, are these teams more effective since the team coaching started? They said yes. Great. Thank goodness. It would have been a very different doctorate that said no. That's good news. But why? And they all said, because the relationship between us and the team is better. Now, these were the same stakeholders who were going task, 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 just do it better, faster, quicker, no mistakes. But something happened where, as the relationship, the cohesion, the trust, the confidence of the teams developed inside the team, they began to be more confident in building relationships with their stakeholders. And the quality of that relationship influenced the perception of the stakeholders around how effective the team is. So relationships are important in the work we're doing as team coaches, but also in building those bridges between the team and the stakeholder and how the team is perceived. So my second question for our breakout, I think Nicola will try and put you into the same breakout so you don't have to start all over again, is when it comes to the relational aspect of team coaching, whether you're in practice yet or not, what aspects of your team coaching practice do you think contribute most to this relational aspect of team coaching? What are the things you do that helps build those relationships, not just between you and the team, but also between the team members? Again, 15 minutes. Would love a different spokesperson if possible. And again, keep making sure we have democracy in the voices and we're aware of language and terminology. So Nicola, over to you. I think we're going to get people back into their breakout rooms. Probably have time for one or two people maybe to raise hands and share what was coming out of their conversation. What do you do to really exercise that relational side? Thank you. We've got two volunteers, Stacey and Angeline. And then if you're not getting a chance to speak, we'd love to be seeing you share some of those insights on the chat. So all those spokespeople out there, much appreciated. Stacey, let me hand over to you. What came out of your conversation when you think about this idea of us really building and leveraging that relational muscle in our team coaching practice?
So a dynamic that came out of our discussion was being able to create that cultural sensitivity as groups coach people that have English as a second language, and they're in a place where technology isn't real strong. So giving space before and after a team meeting online, and then being able to give them space to go longer if they want to, and not them thinking that from the Western perspective, oh, we got to stop because they're busy. So giving that extended care about time, as well as that care is extended, it begins to help the team themselves accept each other when they come in late and that kind of thing. So it's really just about the cultural sensitivity that builds that.
Which you can also, even in homogenous cultures, extrovert, introvert, as well as cultural differences. So space, understanding that we don't have to rush past the person. And it's always interesting. I don't know if others find this, but for me, a real sign of success is, as myself and my fellow team coach role model, summarizing, asking questions, staying with somebody, maybe noticing interruptions after a few sessions when the team preempt your next question and ask it themselves, or say, oh, sorry, I interrupted you. When they begin to almost role model the coaching behaviors we assume, I think that's a real sign of the transference of these skills. Thank you so much for sharing that. Angeline, what would you like to share from your conversation around these relational practices?
Oh, yeah. Well, again, I think there was one person that's much more experienced in this, and a few of us that are like, we do coaching, but we're, haven't started group coaching. So we looked at a couple of things that come up is about the key things of building that psychological safety, so that equality of voice and empathy for each other, and kind of take time outside of the focus on the task, the strategy. So that bit, we kind of said, I've worked with graduates, and the relationship building and the finding out what they did at the weekend comes so naturally to them. And the higher up people get in their career, the less important seems to be based on that. And then you end up with toxic environments and people that almost in a team think that no one's interested in them as a person. So and also what I've tried, and I'm trying when I work as a trainer, facilitating learning, is trying to build that reflective, how we're working together, that they see that as a reasonable part to add into meetings.
So
which is hard.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. And
they're like, we don't have time, we run out of time. And I'm like, oh my goodness, but that's the key thing. Yeah.
So, and again, I know there's lots of hands. I may not get to everybody, and there's lots of great ideas. I see contracting being mentioned a lot. I see personality tools being used to help see the person. I'm struck by something that Peter Hawkins will often say is how to not locate the problem in a person, but locate it in the disconnection. And I'm struck by a team I was working with, a senior exec team, 4 men and 1 woman, and I asked them to introduce each other. And you can imagine, the men, it was jokey, and it was about which sports team they all liked. But when it was the turn of one of the men to introduce the female member, you might as well ask them to come up with Einstein's theory of relativity. I think she likes cats was the best. I mean, they've been together for 4 or 5 years. And so never assume that there's knowledge beyond the role. And some teams are different to that, of course. But again, how do we build their relation through our relation? And I think, again, for any of us who are out there team coaching, and for me, team coaching is different to group coaching. Group coaching, I am supporting individual coaching in a group environment so that they're peer learning. For me, team coaching is an intact team. They have skin in the game for the team to perform. But often that work is done with 2 team coaches because of the complexity. But what we role model in our relationship gets amplified also in what's in the room. So are we psychologically safe with each other? Are we aligned? Can we take risks? The team will pick up on that and capture it. Lots of great learning. I'm so sorry the clock is against me on this. So I appreciate that Valerie and Ina and others have lots to share. If you can get it onto the chat, that'd be great. I want to show you one last thing from the research, if that's okay. And then we'll give you one more breakout room and then close off there. So what have we done so far? We've talked about, for me, team coaching needs rigor to actually just make the case about why it's an important organizational investment. I still notice individual development gets the budget much more than team. And it's changing, but there's still a sense of, there's not a question about individual coaching or individual going on a program. There's still a hesitation over team coaching at times because it's complex. I'm hoping this research and our other experiences of what we've shared can help us talk about the benefits of team coaching. We've talked about team coaching isn't just about process or models, be it 5 C's or team diagnostic 6 conditions. They're useful, but it's relational. There was an initial view from Hackman and Wagaman that you don't need to focus on relationships. You just focus on performance. Happy teams don't perform better. And yet there is a sense of cohesion, togetherness, identity, contact that does help the performance. And it helps change the stakeholder view of the team, which is one of my findings. My last finding I want to share with you was a big surprise. And it's quite a complex diagram. So let me use an example to talk through it. So I mentioned one of the teams, the management team, the team that began by describing their own culture as poisonous, backstabbing, we hate meetings. And so if you look to the left here, the team coaching, we did contracting and we did diagnostic. That was a trigger to raise some awareness about how they all felt about the team and how the stakeholder felt. So they moved into an assessment via the debrief. Wow, this is what we really think of the team. That's interesting. And this is what our stakeholders think. That's interesting. And we began to see some signs of hope. But the management team and the operational team stalled. The expectation was they'd go away and create a plan. The project team went ahead and did that. They went off and executed a plan and began to move on things. But the other two teams got stuck. And as I looked at the research, I came across a concept in team effectiveness called team adaptation. So it's where a team has to adapt because there is a cue or a trigger in their environment that means they have to change. And when I looked at that model, it talked about they assess the situation, they build a plan, they execute, and they learn. But what I was noticing was those steps eventually happened, but there needed to be enough psychological safety to help the team even get to the plan. So the reason that the management and operations team stalled was they hadn't quite got there yet. They were kind of talking about a plan, but they didn't quite have the rigor and the honesty of conversation. So I began to frame team coaching, and often it's a hard thing to explain. What is team coaching? We've already mentioned, is it facilitation? Is it team learning? I have clients that go, team coaching? Are you coaching all the members of the team individually? What I began to recognize was the very experience of these three teams mapped to this idea of team adaptation. And so team coaching is both a trigger for the team to have to adapt because they're getting data about themselves they've never had before, but it's also helping them build adaptive muscle because they're learning to take on feedback, sense make, build a plan. As they build a plan, they're getting what we call team cognition. They're getting a similar view of the map. They all know where they are in the field. They're also getting cohesion, which is one of the benefits we mentioned at the very start. And as they start to execute the plan, they start getting confidence, and psychological safety builds more. And that confidence then transfers to how they engage their stakeholders. So what got the two teams stuck was they didn't quite have enough psychological safety. And what happened by chance or by the process was each of those teams that got stuck, they had to have another critical moment. Again, using Eric DeHaan's language around individual coaching. He talks about individual coaching often needing a critical moment to really pivot it. Both these teams went back into a cycle and with our help had an even more tough, honest conversation about something, either from the diagnostic or something that just happened to the team. And that was enough to give them enough psychological safety that they could form a plan and start having that shared view and start building that cohesion. So for me, the interesting part here is framing team coaching, not just as an intervention, but as a way to help teams build adaptability so that they can be more adaptable for the next change that happens to them, whether that's environmental or internal. So my last ask for you is, what are the potential implications for your clients of today or tomorrow and for their organizations if team coaching was seen not as an intervention by itself, but as a trigger to help teams adapt, but also build adaptability? Are you thinking, whatever, it doesn't really matter? Or do you think this would resonate with your organizations and clients in a different way? Because again, I go in and I try and sell team coaching, and there's not always a lot of appetite for that because I'm having the wrong conversation. I'm trying to sell the package holiday to Spain or to Mexico or wherever you want to go. And maybe this is a different way for us to have a partnering conversation about how important is adaptation and adaptability. So one more time with love. If we have enough time, we'll get you into a breakout room. We won't get a chance for a debrief, but I'd love you to have that conversation one more time in your breakout room of what are you making of this link between team coaching and team adaptability? Would that resonate with you and your clients and your organizations? Nicola, wave that magic wand one more time, please. Yeah, I see mainly smiles. I'm hoping that's a good sign that you were with a nice bunch of people. We've been triaging to make sure they're all from good homes and good people. So hopefully you enjoyed the conversation. I promise no more breakout rooms. I know it gets dizzy. We've got 1 minute left. The question might be, so it's called how team coaching contributes to team effectiveness. So did it contribute to team effectiveness? Let's see what the answer is. So again, the way we measured team effectiveness was we did one-to-one interviews at the beginning and at the end. We had the team complete the 6 conditions, team diagnostic survey, and we spoke to stakeholders really quick. For each of the 3 teams, those 3 measures of team effectiveness, quality of outputs, team viability, member satisfaction, all went up. Some less than others. The operational team, task quality didn't move a lot because there wasn't a lot to move on the task. It's pretty manual. But all 3 dimensions went up following the team coaching. And the qualitative comments. Look at that management team, the one that was poisonous. They couldn't even be in a room together. It's now a learning experience as opposed to being grilled for your mistakes. And it's the work that they did. We were just there to hold the space and let the conversations, the tough conversations happening. It's a really positive to review how far we've come. So the team members were talking about those relational aspects being stronger. It's a more positive environment. And then look at the bottom, the stakeholders who are all task focused. They also said across all 3 teams, they saw them, perceived them, it's a perception, as being more effective. And again, look at the relational lens. They're more effective at engaging people. It's almost like the task focus somehow went into the background when they began to be engaged by the teams and the relational side developed. There's more direct engagement. We feel that they're less removed from the business. That's the strategy team. So it's only one set of data, 3 teams, 1 organization, all based physically in Ireland. It doesn't generalize across every teams, but I'm hoping both the research, the conversations you've had in the breakouts have all given you, whether you're new to team coaching and hoping to bring it into your organization, do it for the first time, or you're an experienced practitioner, I'm hoping you got something from this conversation. And I really appreciate Nicola's help to help us really have engaging conversations. So thank you all. And on that note, Nicola, I think you're going to maybe just share a bit about the networking event that we're going to have.
I am, but just a question for you actually, just before we come to the end of this session. I mean, I know that you were sort of poring over some of the chat responses and everything, and the conversation we've had during the session. What sticks in your mind, Colm? What are you taking from this yourself?
I mean, for me, a recurring theme is how much our organizations really need a different way of developing inside, that there is a place for one-to-one development, but I think we've talked a lot about the cohesion, the ripple effects, the knock-on, how teams cannot afford not to be developed. So I think as we see the demand for this, I think it's a bit of education, but I'm hoping organizations begin to see the value of what's being offered in the space, and a great group of practitioners here to help support them and be their partners. So that's my key learning.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And I love that slide you left at the end, and I actually screenshotted it and put it in the chat. So save it. Some of the outcomes that you saw and some of the impact that you're having on individual teams and individual members of that team, I think really quite profound. So I've snapped it. So I'd say save it. It's absolute gold and it's in the chat. And if you'd like to save the chat, everybody too, if you look at down the bottom, there's 3 dots, click that, click save chat. you can save everything that's been discussed so far, and some of the insights that you've all been sharing there have been equally golden. So thank you very much for everybody to engage as much as you have in this fantastic discussion, and thank you to you, Colm, as well, for leading this this conversation. I think that everybody here has taken something from it, and it's thanks to your opening up of this conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Much appreciated.